Good to go. So, Mr. Leonard, 461 has, we're talking about language that was put forward by Ms. Yang on harassment and hazing. What I need to know from you and what the committee needs to know is where else is this language? Because I believe it is traveling in other bills. And so please, and I would say the committee needs to adjourn at 4. So,
Understood.
and I need to vote on this.
So
or hoping to.
very simply, the language was added to S103 when House General voted it out earlier this week. It is now in the House Education Committee, and they started testimony today, or at least I assume it's in the House Education Committee. My expectation is it would have gone to the floor today and been referred over to House Ed.
So S103 is not a bill that we ever had. Just to remind everyone, this was a office place harassment bill, workplace harassment bill.
Employment public accommodations. Yeah.
Thank you. That left economic development very early in the session. It went our economic development.
Yep.
It did not have the language that was put forward by Ms. Yang. It did pick up that language in the House, and yep, on the House side, and now it is traveling from, it was added, I'm guessing, in House Government Ops or House General Military Affairs, and now House Education has it.
That's right. So it's in House Education now. It was voted out of House General 2 days ago, I believe. So, or maybe yesterday. The draft is dated 2 days ago.
So
Yes.
does everyone know? So everyone knows that this is coming our way, one way or the other. And so if we don't put it in today, we're going to likely have a conversation about it next week. Everything. Keep going. You need to leave. Feel free to. It would likely be back in this committee sometime next week or the week after at the very end.
If it makes it before the finish of the session. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know how long the process will be in House Education. They just started with it today. So
great. So now I'm going to shift to Ms. Seelig. Please stay.
I will.
Yeah, and no, you don't even need to leave the chair.
Oh, okay.
I promise she's right there. Rachel, thanks for joining us. You wanted to give some testimony and share some final thoughts on this before we make a decision as to whether or not to add it.
Yes. Thank you so much for the time. Getting a feedback or hearing that.
You're okay.
Okay. So for the record, Rachel Seelig, I'm the director of the Disability Law Project at Vermont Legal Aid. Nice to see you all again. I'm sorry to be here with you in person. I very much encourage you to improve the proposed language received from Dorian to remove the severe or pervasive definition of harassment, especially as it applies to schools.
Just a second, we're having some difficulty. What was that, Senator?
I was just wondering if Rachel might want to take her image off.
Yeah, that could help. If you disappear, we might hear you more clearly.
Yeah.
Is this any better?
Yeah.
It is.
Okay.
Great. Why don't you start from the top?
Sure. For the record, Rachel Seelig, Director of the Disability Law Project at Vermont Legal Aid. I am here to encourage you to adopt the changes to Title 16 that eliminate the severe or pervasive definition of harassment, especially as it applies to schools. I agree with the testimony that you heard from Jessica Barquist from the Vermont Network. And I wanted to offer you kind of the perspective of the disability community and disability advocates when it comes to the issue of hazing, harassment, and bullying. One of the things that we frequently see with our clients is that they are targeted for harassment, whether because of their disability or because of intersectional identities. They live with it and they live with it and they live with it. And then when they finally can't live with it any longer and respond, they are the ones who are accused of harassment and bullying. They are the ones who experience the negative consequences. And so you might wonder, why is it that we're supporting this? We're supporting this because we strongly believe that our clients would not have to endure for so long if the standard were lower, and that their schools would be much more responsive to the experiences that they're having if they were obligated to start investigating harassment before it becomes severe and pervasive. So I did submit some written testimony to you with a couple of experiences of clients who really fit within this paradigm. One student, it was a biracial, at the time, 7-year-old child with several disabilities who returned to school after homeschooling due to COVID. And on her very first day back at school, classmates started to target her. They teased her about her tics because one of her disabilities was Tourette's. They told other kids not to be friends with her. They physically pushed her. They threatened to hit her. And when she finally responded to these physical acts of harassment, she was made to apologize for her behavior. They were not made to apologize for her, to her. And the same students then began verbally harassing her about her hairstyle and about her smell. The school did not investigate this as harassing behavior. And when the mother insisted on an investigation, they told her, without having done an investigation, that if they were to open one, they would find that her daughter had been the one who retaliated and would be the one in trouble, not the other children. She felt so unsafe, she could not return to her community school any longer. So the reason that I bring this story up is that the proposal you have in front of you would require schools and districts to consider the totality of circumstances, as well as the totality of types of conduct that students have to endure, which would mean that just because initially she was teased for her tics and then was teased and harassed for her gender and then was harassed for her race, those would not be looked at separately. They would be looked at in the totality. And that would have given her a much higher chance of being protected from ongoing behavior before it got to the place where she felt she had no choice left but to respond. The word that's currently required in statute is that in order for something to be harassment in school, it has to be substantially undermining access to education. We have another client who asked me to not share her name, but did ask me to share her story. So I'll call her Julie, but not her real name, who came to us at the end of her freshman year of high school, although her story began long before that. She'd been on an IEP since the age of 4, but her disability really hadn't been understood for many years. And one of the things that we didn't learn until the Disability Law Project got involved was that she had a delay in her processing speed. And what she had done as a way of compensating for this was a skill that many girls with disabilities learn called masking. So it wasn't always evident when she was confused or didn't understand what was going on around her socially. And because of this, the harassment that she experienced really was having a very severe impact on her mental health, but she wasn't showing that to the adults in the building. She didn't have any of what we might call externalizing behaviors. But on the inside, she was living in terror of one main aggressor, as well as another ring of students around that one. She was followed, she was threatened, she was physically assaulted, she was verbally harassed, she was called a skank and a whore by the other kids. But this, again, was not perceived to be substantially undermining her access to education because she kept coming to school and she masked her fear by smiling and laughing in reaction to harassment. And she was also perceived by school staff as participating in her own harassment, when in fact, because of her disability, she just did not understand what was happening or how to cope. Her mother reported this problem to the school over and over. Phone calls went unanswered, emails were ignored, and finally an incident took place where the student I'm calling Julie responded not with a laugh and a smile, but with a physical response. The parent of the other student demanded an investigation, and one was opened immediately. An independent investigator came in. Finally, students were interviewed.
I just want to interrupt just for a second because we have a question is relevant now. Please go ahead, Senator.
Oh, hi, Rachel, it's Senator Gulick.
Hi, Senator.
I can't see you, but just a question. Do you know why? Did you ever find out why that students, the emails and the letters and the complaints weren't being addressed by the school? Did you ever find out why?
We received a full copy of the record in the case, but none of it explained why the district had chosen to not respond to those emails. But we did determine in the record that they had received the emails and they had records of the phone calls.
And do you know how many years ago that was, or how recent that was?
So this took place in, let's see, it must have started, we must have started with her in the 2020-2021 school year. And so this took place the year before that. But by the time we started with this student, they were not in school. They had been so terrified by the school that the family decided to work on a flexible pathway. They presented it to the school. The school did not respond or assure that any credit would be received for that plan. They made no plan to safely return the student to school. And the student actually lived so near the school that she was afraid to take walks in her neighborhood because just seeing the building was putting her in a state of terror.
I'm just asking because I'm curious about the time. So 2019, 2020 was part of that year remote. Do you know?
The very last part of that year would have been remote because the pandemic started March 2020.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So we were ultimately able to move this student to a different school in a different district. And that was really the only solution that was going to work for her, given her disability and the entrenched trauma that the school building had caused to her. And that really transformed her experience. And she actually was able to then graduate early from high school in that new setting. She shared with me to share with you all her comment, which is that over the years in her school district, there have been many more students than she could ever imagine feeling the same exact way she had, not just emotionally, but physically and mentally, from being harassed, bullied, and beat up. All these incidents put her through so much agony and in very difficult situations, to the point even coping with it was so hard to find. She was so drained, having to watch her back everywhere she went on a daily basis, hiding in the bathroom, eating lunch by herself, faking being sick just so she didn't have to go to school. She was always wondering who she was going to run into or get a message from next. Every single day questioning herself, what did I do to deserve any of this? And why is this happening? We have also had clients drop out of school completely because of harassment that has gone unaddressed, because it has not reached that severe or pervasive standard. That's a loss to our state that we really cannot recover from for those children. The most recently available data from the U.S. Department of Education Civil Rights Data Collection is unfortunately quite old. It's from 2017. But in that year alone, there were 906 allegations of disability-based harassment, 1,208 allegations of harassment or bullying based on race, color, national origin, or religion. And for some reason, Vermont did not submit basis of sex data that year. So the most recent available on basis of sex is 2015, when there were 1,530 allegations of discrimination in our schools. These numbers are incredibly high given our school student population. And this is with the standard where it is. We have a problem with harassment and bullying in our schools. And we will not be able to prevent harassment and bullying if we say it's okay up to an incredibly high level, and only then will we stop it. We need to stop harassment and bullying at the beginning. And I know there are concerns about unintended consequences of changing the standard, but I think these can be appropriately addressed through improved utilization of the MTSS system and special education and related services to ensure needs are being met, to provide social skills instruction, development of regulation and self-advocacy skills. We can use the investments that the legislature is appropriating in mentoring programs and other programs that help children develop healthy peer relationships. We can finally require state-provided or state-approved training and resources for the staff who are assigned to investigate bullying and harassment. Right now, the only requirement is that you designate staff. There's no special requirement about what training they need to receive.
Senator Gullit.
Is there a way for us to provide the training and the resources and the staff without changing the standard?
I mean,
Are the two coupled no matter what?
I think if you change the standard, you have a much higher incentive to make sure the training happens. Because I think a lot of our school districts, including the ones that these children attended, think they are doing it right and meeting the standard. And so if the standard changes, that is an opportunity for education and for training. Could you change the requirements of the model policy and procedure to require training without changing the standard? You could, but I think our students would be better off if both changed. I think our students would also be better off with improved data collection and reporting systems, with schools having ongoing technical assistance and coaching where we find unintended disproportionate impact on historically marginalized students. And really, I think the core thing that we can improve, regardless of whether you change the standard to address the problem of harassment and bullying in our schools, is differentiated response that focuses on education and restorative practices and positive behavior interventions and supports and safety planning, which are all initiatives that you have supported over the last many years and ask schools to really stand up. And I think that is how we can work with students to prevent these behaviors and to stop these behaviors much earlier along the line than if we wait until they've gotten to the place where they are severe or pervasive before we step in.
Thank you, Ms. Seelig.
Thank you.
I think I have a divided committee
Yes.
on this, and I also need to move a bill, and if I 2-2 even makes 0 in the legislature, you can't advance something. It doesn't mean, again, that this would be the end of this conversation. The bill could always be amended, as well as we know the House is sending something right back to Senate Economic Development. But I appreciate the testimony very, very much. I don't think we need to hear anything else at this point. Your colleague Sparks is not available right now, so if we chat a little bit more, yeah.
I got just one question. What was the mechanism for delivery? It was email. Was it personal, face to face?
It was email, face-to-face, and phone calls.
So cell phones?
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I did just, Senator Gullit just mentioned she's going to probably have somebody come in next week. So clearly it's not the end of the conversation.
Sure.
But I do need to move something today.
I understand, and I appreciate your fitting me in, especially when I heard that you needed to adjourn by 4 o'clock. So thank you for the time. I really always enjoy coming and speaking with you. And again, sorry I couldn't do that in person today.
No problem. We
Thank you.
appreciate your
Thanks,
partnership.
Rachel.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we're still 2-2 on this right now. Mr. Leonard, I think we're good with you. I appreciate you sticking around.
I will.
And then I think we'll move this bill without it in it, since I think the committee is split. If that changes, if we get, I don't know if being here would make a difference, but I think we're 2-2 right now. So I think I'm hoping still to move it. So Ms. St. James, would you just take us through what we have, and then if somebody wants to make a motion, this is the Miscellaneous Education Bill, draft 3.14618, right?
Yes.
We've seen this multiple times,
Yes.
and I would say maybe tell us what, I mean, we're talking a million feet up with the overview.
So Beth St. James, Office of Legislative Counsel, this is your strike all amendment to H 461, which is the miscellaneous education bill. Sections 1, 2, and 3 do away with the requirement that school districts join the shared school district data management system. So if it suspends the implementation of that system, it doesn't require school districts to join it, but it does allow existing users to continue to use it. And that was part of the bill as passed by the House. Section 4 is an amendment to the Vermont National Guard Tuition Benefit Program. It adds a benefit for allowing the benefit to be used at a non-Vermont approved post-secondary education institution if the degree program is not available in Vermont. That was language included in the House passed version. The home, section 5 is the changes to the home study statute. We've been over this quite a bit. The big changes are doing away with the hearing process or option. And there were some other smaller but still substantive changes. Senator Kimby, did you get my email?
I did.
Okay, so there's been no changes.
Yeah, there've been no
Okay.
changes. Yeah.
And that, if we leave the overview of the home study changes at that, we're gonna jump to page 13, section 6. This is an amendment to the Ethnic and Social Equity Standards Advisory Working Group, also known as the Act 1 Working Group. The House made 2 changes and you're making 1 change to this section. The House changes were on page 14, lines 3 and 9, pushing out 2 deliverable dates. 1, the working group's review of standards for student performance and recommendations to the state board is moving from December 31st of last year to June 30th of this year. And the state board's obligation to consider adopting ethnic and social equity studies standards is moving from December 31st of last year to December 31st of this year. You all on page 12, line 19, well, 18 and 19, have also pushed the working group's life span out from July 1, 2023 to September 1, 2023. Any questions on that? Okay. Section 7. So now we're going to get everything we talked about from here on out is language you all have added. Page 14, line 14, section 7 is the creation of the Act 1 Technical Advisory Work Group. This is essentially a continuation of a subset of the Act 1 work group that would spring to life after the Act 1 work group, Act 1 working group no longer ceases to exist. This technical advisory working group would become effective.
Oh, yeah, please, go ahead. Yeah.
No longer ceases to exist.
When the when the Ethnic and Social Equity Standards Advisory Working Group ceases to exist, this new technical advisory group would exist, would become effective.
Good catch, yeah.
And they are made up of a subset of the Ethnic and Social Equity Standards Advisory Working Group as they existed on their last day of existence, August 31st, 2023. And their reason for being is to provide ongoing assistance to everyone that the Ethnic and Social Equity Standards Working Group has provided recommendations to. And they would cease to exist on January 31st, 2024. Section 8 is on page 17, line 18. This is the Regional Student Driver Ed Pilot Program. Do we need to walk through this?
Mr. Gulick.
I mean, I think we're good on this one.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a pilot for 1 year, correct?
Kind of. It's so there's no sunset language in here. It is requiring AOE and the Department of Motor Vehicles to come up with a program before December 15th of this year. But then the clinics with the students behind the wheels would be next summer, July 2024. And then you have report back requirements with recommendations on whether or not to continue the program.
And we'll give you an outline of this for the floor, and I'll help you.
I've already done a section by section on this, so
So clear.
there is an appropriation in this section. I just want to flag that. And it's coming from the ed fund.
Yeah.
Um,
So just so you know, you don't have to work on this weekend. Please go ahead.
I just wanted, can I share with my, maybe one thing that I've heard
Yeah.
represent recently, which was from someone who's a constituent, got in touch with them and said that he is not in favor of this because at least in his mind, it is a program that is simply for the convenience of parents. That's what was worded and said back to me. So I just wanted to share that with folks of the parents. So I just want.
I would need more info.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All I can think of is it's because they get their driving test, they get their driving done in a more concentrated fashion and more quickly. That's all.
Well, I mean, if that person wants to email me, one thing I'm happy to write back and say is this has not, it like, that was not the priority. For sure, the priority was the lack of driver's education that's happening in the state, the need to get kids educated. Agency of Education, Lindsay, you want to add anything to that?
I don't think so. I think you.
Yeah, I mean, that's the first time I've heard of that kind of idea. So if the person wants to email me directly or email anyone, I can see you're tapping the table, so he's getting ready.
I'll get,
No,
yeah,
no,
I'll get the info.
I will just say that the language, the last language you all had before crossover
Yeah,
did have a rule suspension in there that would have allowed students to be behind the wheel in longer chunks of time than is currently required. That has been removed from this section to the extent that that is the
concern. person.
draft that your constituent was looking at. That's no longer, it's all the current driver's ed rules that apply to the program.
And I would say, Lindsay, if you want to, or whoever the driver's ed person is, could also be helpful in responding to Senator Felix Friend's constituent. Thanks.
We're on page 19, section 9, lines 5 and 6. This is the language we walked through yesterday related to Union School District Board member nominating petitions. It changes the number of signatures required to get on a nominating petition to be on the ballot to get a seat on a Union District School Board from 30 voters from 60 to 30 voters, or 1% of the legal voters residing in the district, or the proposed district, depending on when the vote happens, for both unified Union school districts and Union elementary and Union high school districts in the at-large representation model and the modified at-large representation models. And that's sections 9, 10, and 11. Do you want to walk through that any more closely than we did yesterday?
Okay. So,
And I'll come to you if I need more guidance. How's that?
I'm here.
Okay.
again, this is going to approach, and because it's the ed funded or private finance. Okay, thank you. Yeah.
The last section is the effective date section, section 12 on page 24 at the very bottom there, line 19. So the Ethnic and Social Equity Standards Advisory Working Group and the effective date section will take effect on passage because you're extending dates that would expire before July 1, 2023. So you're going to want those sections to take effect on passage. The Technical Advisory Group, that new group, does not take effect until September 1. And then everything else in the bill would take effect on July 1, 2023.
Questions, committee? Yeah, please.
I have a question. Are we still able to take an official vote on the draft language to amend the harassment statutes?
Sure, we can do like a straw poll. Is that okay?
I mean, whatever's on the record. I mean, that's.
Yeah. So I can't make a motion.
I'll make
Okay, so you are recommending that we include the harassment language draft, read the number from me,
1.1.
1.1 into this bill. All those in favor? All opposed?
And I can give an explanation if anyone wants to hear it, or if not, I can do that some other time.
Please feel free to say, if you've been helped, I mean, please feel free to.
I mean, I voted no on this, and I said, you've heard me say this before, I'll say it again. I spoke with leadership of my district, and you could say this is true or not true, but the fact is, more by POC kids are engaged in harassment in my district than by POC kids. So I'm concerned that this will negatively impact kids who are already living in our most vulnerable communities in my district. I'm also worried that it's going to have unintended consequences on the very institutions that we look to raise folks out of poverty, which is our education system. So those are my two, that's where I am now. Might I change in the future? Absolutely. I'm open to learning, but that's, with the information I have now, that's where I stand. And
Well, I mean, I'll just say that I think the challenge that I'm faced with is, we talk about addressing discrimination in other bills, and we have the Office of Racial Equity whose job it is to propose to us language that addresses discrimination. It's an office that has attorneys and hard workers who put this language together, and they present it to us, and for us to address these issues of discrimination. And I defer to their experience, knowledge, and judgment when it comes to these things. This is an issue that's really important to my constituents, also myself personally, so I'm disappointed to not see it in the bill.
So Senator Bulick did offer to bring in her some school leadership next week. Since we do have probably at least a week before this makes it to the floor, give my word, and I appreciate Senator Bulick's offer to have her district dialogue a little bit with us to see if we might be able to get to a different place on it. It sounds like you're open to that conversation. I know Senator Williams open to that conversation.
and I just have to say, I also talked with Rachel yesterday about possibly, changing or pivoting, making some changes to the language and just thinking of other solutions that might be available.
So I hope we have your support to move the bill.
Yeah.
I appreciate Senator Bulick's offer to bring Sparks in next week also, and we'll continue to have a conversation. And some other people, yeah. So with that, if somebody wants to make a motion to move draft 3.1, it would be welcome at this point.
Make a motion to.
Sorry.
The motion's been made and seconded.
Any further discussion? Senator Bulick,
Yes.
Senator Kashid,
Yes.
Senator Williams, yes, Senator Kashid.
Yes, and we have one absent, so 4-0-1. Thank you, Senator Bulick, for reporting it. And again, you probably don't have to do. You could start your floor speech, but you're not gonna have a floor speech probably at the same time. We're gonna do miscellaneous school meals and school safety and a bunch of things.
When
So,
do you think that will be? Not next week, but the week after.
meals,
Yeah. I mean, all of these.
I think it's gonna all be in those final negotiations. Rules committee. I think this could be up before, this could be up later at the end of next week.
Oh, the end of next week. All right.
Yeah.
Wow.
Possibly. Well, let's put it this way, it's, yeah, maybe.
Okay, great.
Thanks, everybody.